Hey there, welcome to East and West. Let's talk about the Silent War. Released in 2012, this Chinese Hong Kong film is set during the period of Chinese Civil War that took place during the late 1940s between the KMT Republic of China and the CPC People's Republic. The main plot follows a woman named Zhang Zuining, played by actress Zhao Zun, who works as an intelligence operative in a CPC government agency, simply known as 701. After the KMT alter all their broadcasting frequencies, Zuining is ordered to find someone that the agency thinks might help them find the new frequencies. Instead, she comes across a man named He Bing, played by veteran Hong Kong actor Tony Leung Chung Wai. He Bing is a blind piano tuner whose hearing basically borders on the supernatural, and after a few promises and a couple of light threats, he's signed up to 701 and the rest of the film continues from there. Now, when this film was first released, the reactions towards it were unbelievably mixed. And rather interestingly, they were also mixed by location. The film did relatively well in mainland China, but kind of failed in Hong Kong and Taiwan. And I have to be honest, I've seen a number of the complaints that a lot of people have with this film, and to put it simply, I don't think a lot of them hold up. Now, based on what I've seen, I suspect that part of the reason I like this film more than most is simply to do with expectations. Along with being the first film that I've actually seen by Alan Mook and Felix Chong, the two directors, I also went into this film basically knowing nothing about it. When I first saw this film, I had seen this poster, and that was it. So I wasn't entirely sure what I was in for here. To that end, since I am going to recommend this film, allow me to make a few clarifying statements about it. This is not a war film. This is not an action film. This is not a spy film. If you go into this film expecting like heavy surveillance or action or espionage or anything like that, you are going to be fantastically disappointed. To explain what this film is, the most direct comparison I have is to 2014's The Imitation Game. For those who haven't seen it yet, The Imitation Game is based on the true story of Alan Turing and the other members of Bletchley Park, as they try to build a device that will enable them to crack the Enigma machine, a code-making device that the Nazis were using during World War II that was, at the time, the most complex coding machine ever created. And despite being set during World War II, the film neglects all the action on the front lines to simply focus on the tension and drama that involves with trying to break codes. Which means there are large portions of this film which simply involve a group of people sitting around a table. And in many ways, even down to the visual aspect, Silent War is actually a very similar film, even though it did come out first. Now, yes, there are in fact a lot of differences between these films, mostly when it comes to tone, because this film is definitely a lot less dark and depressing than The Imitation Game. Most of which I think is because that while Imitation Game was in fact based on real events, Silent War on the other hand is based on the novels by Chinese writer Mai Zhao, which I was intending to read in preparation for this episode, but I wasn't able to actually access any of the copies. And the other main difference is basically that the point of the films are almost the complete opposite. In Imitation Game, they have the access to the codes, but they're just not able to crack them. In Silent War, they have plenty of cryptographers on deck, but they're not actually able to find the encrypted messages. Something which is rather important if you eventually want to be able to read said messages. But at the same time, it's also a lot simpler of an issue to deal with, which means that the film has to have a lot more than just that in the plot. Which brings me to the other part that almost every reviewer I've seen of this film complains about, and that's to do with the fact that this film contains a love triangle, possibly square. In the second half of this film, He Bing meets one of the cryptographers on base, played by Taiwanese singer Mavis Fan, and the two end up striking a relationship. However, this particular relationship goes against the fact that He Bing was clearly having feelings for Zui Ning, and she possibly was having feelings back, even though she kept them rather subdued. And I know that a lot of people hate the fact that in this supposed spy thriller they decide to throw in some romantic drama for no reason. Especially one that doesn't actually have much in the way of drama in it. But for me, I have absolutely no problems with this for one big reason. Everybody involved is okay with how it turns out. Yes, at the start of this film there is definitely some infatuation going on, but it becomes very apparent early on that this isn't happening. You know, maybe it's simply because I've seen so many other films where this type of thing goes terribly badly, but I actually found it really refreshing to see these two people make an adult decision like this and say, no, this is not something we're doing, and then actually stick to it. And the best proof I have about why it doesn't bother me is that after He Bing's wedding, yeah, he actually ends up getting married, this is the first scene that happens afterwards.
洞房花燭夜出嚟攬住第二個女人，你點做人老公㗎？
好朋友鬧新房，點都要招呼下啩。
This is the type of thing I'm talking about. There's no romantic tension, there's no unresolved feelings. These two are simply good friends, and that's all they need to be. And once again, I'm going to refer back to Imitation Game because, like I said, there's actually a lot of similarities between these films, and the same types of things happen there. The Imitation Game is not just about trying to beat Enigma, it also goes very deeply into the personal lives of Alan Turing and a lot of the other people at Bletchley Park, and there's actually a very significant portion of the film that's devoted to that. Now, most people would probably say that the personal stuff is definitely a lot more interesting and a lot more well done in Imitation Game, and probably that the film is just a lot better in general than Silent War. And yeah, I agree, I don't have any arguments against that. But just because it's not as good doesn't mean it shouldn't exist. And despite the number of similarities, these are two very different films. And while Imitation Game, the personal stuff is meant to just heighten the drama, Silent War does the complete opposite in trying to calm the film down. What I like about these scenes is that they show that this base that's just in the middle of nowhere, it's not just a place where people work. This is a place where people actually live. I don't see these relationships and romances as there for drama. I see them as just a reminder of the fact that, hey, these people do actually have lives outside of their job. And it's something as small as that that means, even though most of the film is set in one place, half of which is an underground bunker, it allows the film to feel friendly and sort of relax in between the more dramatic moments. I say dramatic rather than intense because the only real tension in this film is near the end. But that doesn't stop the rest of the film having moments that are really surprisingly epic, especially considering what's actually on screen. And the key to it all is the two main characters, and hands down the best performance goes to Zhao Zun as Sui Ning. Being the actual field operative, she's the one that actually does most of the stuff in the film, which means that we end up getting to see her in a lot of different scenarios and faces. Granted, she's only actually doing stuff about half the time. I mean, there's one scene where literally all she's doing is playing mahjong, but she just nails it in every scene she's in. However, while she does get most of the action, she isn't the focus of the film. That honor goes to Tony Leung as He Bing, who does a fantastic job in his role, even though his character isn't quite as good as Sui Ning, but I put that down to a couple of bad lines and just a few really awkward scenes. Now, the character he plays is blind, and he does a really good job of making it look like he is. At least for half the time, because, as mentioned, this guy's hearing is beyond compare. This guy can hear the way dice roll. I'm not even joking, he can hear dice. Which somehow gets him banned from casinos because being able to tell which way up a die is apparently cheating now. We first meet him at the start, which is really bizarrely slow. I'm actually honestly surprised at how many people are complaining about the second half of this film, where there's just so many problems to talk about in the first half. However, it does do a really good job at giving us a glimpse not only to his character, but to exactly how good his hearing actually is. And again, something a lot of people find dull is the fact that instead of doing something action-oriented, or even taking a proactive stance in the war, all He Bing does in this movie is basically just sit in front of a radio. Not exactly the most interesting of occupations. But considering the fact that there were in fact people in wars like this whose entire job is just to sit and listen to communications, it doesn't bother me so much because, yeah, there are people that actually did this. And as long as the film manages to stay engaging, what's the problem with making a film about them? Now, initially his entire role in the film is just doing what he was hired to do, finding the broadcasts of the KMT. Now, it's never said exactly how this works, and frankly, I call into question the accuracy of about half of the things in this film. But my understanding was that they needed someone that was able to distinguish the sounds of Morse code being played over the general radio static. And him having better hearing means that he's able to identify these sounds when they're less tuned than a normal person would be. Now, he actually managed to get this job done relatively quickly, but then, in between the scenes that show his personal life, we get to the best part of the film, where he's tasked to find 5 different communication lines that they haven't actually found yet. And the reason this is the best part is that the directors have somehow managed to find a way to make a man sitting at a desk in an empty room, turning dials, into one of the most intense and intriguing parts of this entire film. I'm not even joking, that's literally all he's doing, but the way it's shot and the way it's acted, it's insane how much power and tension they're able to draw out of this scene. And it's made even more intense when they start adding visual representations of what he's hearing. And just the way it's shot, well, let me put it this way. This film won Best Cinematography at the 2012 Hong Kong Film Awards for a reason, okay? It deserved it. As for the other characters, they do their job well. There's not really many standouts, but none of them are particularly awful or anything. I do wish some of them were, I'm not going to say more fleshed out, but I do wish a few more of them were given a bit more screen time. There's a few characters and even a few events that are set up at points, but then it's over sort of quickly, and I just wish they were given a little bit more to do. And one thing I really do wish was in here, and apparently this was in the book, but I really wish they went more into detail with the political aspect of what's going on. Now, I know next to nothing about this war, alright? I'm not going to try and pretend otherwise, and to the film's credit, the way it's shot and the way it's written, it doesn't actually require you to. But I'm fairly sure you'd definitely get a lot more out of this if you actually understood what each side was actually doing. And from what little I do know about this particular war, that would also have helped because apparently this was a lot more of a complicated situation than compared to something relatively simplistic as Germans versus the Allies. Also, in terms of story, it's fairly predictable. It's kept rather simplistic. There's not that many times where you're thrown by the things that are happening, even though it does happen occasionally, but you can mostly predict a lot of the events that were going to occur. However, that doesn't stop the film from being intriguing and engaging while it's happening. All in all, while there's definitely some moments in here that are kind of weak, including a number of missed opportunities, I can't say that this film is as bad as others seem to claim it is. As long as you don't go in there expecting heavy drama or large themes or anything that the film doesn't intend to give you, you should have no problems watching this. So if you're looking for a fun and engaging thriller, I highly recommend that you give this one a shot. I give this film 9 dots and 5 dashes. So that was my review of The Silent War. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Till next time.